A big poll today that got a lot of attention, and I think people sort of buried the lead on it. So here's the lead as I read it. Donald Trump is a uniquely unpopular figure in American life. It's a fact that's borne out over and over again. At some point, you would think Republicans are going to realize that, and really realizing. So the poll I was referring to is a new one out today from the New York Times. You might have seen it. Siena College partnered with them. And in a hypothetical presidential rematch between Biden and Trump in 2024, Biden comes in at 44% and Trump at 41%. Now, keep in mind, this is a poll where the current president, Joe Biden's current approval rating, is a dismal 33%. Not good. And yet, head-to-head, he still beats Donald Trump. And that's because, to state the obvious, Donald Trump is a weak candidate. He is a one-term president. He's a guy who lost the popular vote nationally twice. The last time by like 7 million votes. But in a world where Donald Trump potentially loses the 2024 Republican primary, right? What does he do? Would he endorse a Republican candidate? Or does he call the election rigged, as he did multiple times in the 2020 primary and then in the general election, and lead some kind of exodus with his base? That's the threat Republicans are all terrified of, and it explains a lot of the very weird dynamics over in Republican politics right now. NBC News policy editor Benji Sarlin joins me now. Benji, you and I have talked about this for years back and forth, and I was really struck by this polling because this is usually the kind of thing that you could show even to voters, right? Voters are very motivated, particularly like base voters. They're very motivated to win, right? They want to get, show this to them and be like, there's one guy you can nominate who's going to have the worst possible chance. Maybe don't nominate him. And I do wonder whether that message is going to get through at some point.
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, some of this is that polling has also never felt as relevant as it did after 2016, right? Because Trump voters were told that entire time in the lead up that look at all these polls, Trump is going to lose for sure, and then turned out to be totally wrong, right? So everyone, takes it with a real grain of salt. But it is true that there might be a bigger opening for someone like Ron DeSantis to make the case, hey, look, we all love Trump, but there's just too much baggage here. Why risk it? We all want to get rid of Joe Biden. Let's take a safer pick. I mean, you see perhaps with the January 6 hearings, very few base Republicans are going to concede, say, wow, the stuff in this is horrifying. We definitely should abandon Trump. We were wrong ever to support him. But you are hearing some Republicans start to whisper, maybe this does weaken him in the sense that it reminds people that if he were to run again, you would be bringing all this into a general election, whereas right now you have a lot of advantages just focusing on a president who's at a 33% of approval in a New York Times poll.
Right, and you see all these. I saw a quote from I think it was Senator Thune today, who basically was trying to wave Trump off from announcing he's running for re-election before the midterms. I mean, if they could all make him disappear through some magic act, like he just doesn't exist anymore, or he went to Mars, whatever, they would all do it. McConnell, Thune, the whole Republican political class, they would love nothing more for that, at least for this election, if they could.
Sure. I mean, and you've seen quotes in private, at least, pretty much to this effect. There were those recordings of Kevin McCarthy after January 6th, pretty much making that exact argument. And then within days, he concluded that he needs Donald Trump. And he was pretty open about the reasons. He said he was walking, he told the New York Times he was walking the tightest tightrope anyone has ever talked, meaning that Trump could essentially tank the midterm elections for them if they had an antagonistic relationship to him, which, of course, gets to the core problem of this, which is that you can't just necessarily walk away from Trump without Trump taking his voters potentially with him. He has a completely unusual place in the party in this regard, Chris, and that's something they're definitely all worried about. It's a big dynamic heading into 2024.
This is the key, and this, I think, undergirds so much, and you and I have discussed this for a long time. It's that part of it, right? Play out the game. Let's say there's a contested primary and Trump starts to lose. We know what it looks like when he lost the general election. What's it look like? The sort of virulence of Trumpism, his sociopathy, and his supporters' willingness to do things like what they did on January 6th means that, even running a free and fair election in a primary context is not at all a given to me.
No, and it's important to remember that he was shouting rigged and false, voter fraud the entire time during his primary wins in 2016. Now, obviously, it became irrelevant because he did end up winning fair and square by a dominant margin. But he started the 2016 campaign threatening to go independent. It was the very first question asked in the Republican debates. Will you agree to support the nominee? And Trump said no. And he said it gave him, quote, leverage by saying no. He was well aware that this was a threat that they cared about. Later, when it looked like there might be some opportunity to stop him at the convention from getting the nomination, he again started talking about going independent. And he said that, quote, millions of voters would go with him and the party would be doomed, essentially. There's no way he would not make similar threats, I think, based on his prior behavior. If it looked like there was a situation where he was about to lose to another rival and that rival was suddenly being, held up in conservative media as the new thing, as the thing everyone has to go towards. I think in addition to it just being a very ugly primary, I mean, we've shown how, some of the worst attacks he leveled in 2016 were against candidates he was friendly with until the last minute,
right,
like Ted Cruz. There's no reason to think he wouldn't do the same thing to a Ron DeSantis, say, or a Glenn Youngkin or whoever else runs, certainly Mike Pence. So this is just this threat that looms over the entire election for them, Chris. It's not going to go away.
It is the ordering condition for all calculations of Republican politics, that threat and that threat being made good, because it would be so catastrophic. Benjy Sarlin, thanks so much.